Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Exploring Marketing Research. Chapter number 8, Part 1. Survey Research. Learning objectives are to understand the term survey, sample survey, and respondent, to understand the advantages of using survey, to discuss the type of information that may be gathered in a survey, to recognize that few surveys are error-free, to classify the various types of systematic error and give examples of each type. The nature of surveys. Surveys require asking people, called respondents, for information using either verbal or written questions. Questionnaires are interview collect data through the mail, on the telephone, or face-to-face. The more formal term, sample survey, emphasizes that the purpose of contacting respondents is to obtain a representative sample of the target population. Thus, survey is defined as a method of collecting primary data based on communication with a representative sample of individuals. Survey objectives, type of information gathered. The type of information gathered in a survey varies considerably depending on its objectives. Typically, surveys attempt to describe what is happening or to learn the reasons for a particular marketing activity. Identifying characteristics of target markets, measuring consumer attitudes, and describing consumer purchasing patterns are common survey objectives. Most marketing surveys have multiple objectives. Few gather only a single type of factual information. For example, a snowmobile manufacturer might conduct a survey to determine whether consumers are aware of the brand name and learn what purchasers like and dislike about various product features. Survey objectives, the type of information gathered. Because most survey research is descriptive research, the term survey is often associated with quantitative findings. Although it is true that most surveys are conducted to quantify certain factual information, some aspects of survey may also be qualitative. In new product development, a survey often has a qualitative objective of testing and refining new product concepts. Although most marketing surveys are descriptive, they can also be designed to provide insight about causal explanation or to explore ideas. Advantages of surveys. Surveys provide a quick, inexpensive, efficient, accurate, and flexible means of assessing information about a population. The growth of survey research is related to simple idea that to find out what consumers think, you need to ask them. Over the last 50 years, and particularly during last 2 decades, survey research techniques and standards have become quite scientific and accurate. When properly conducted, surveys offer managers many advantages. However, they can also be used poorly. Survey research has also got some problems, and the problems with the survey research are related with poor design or improper execution. So these problems are faced in survey research. Errors in survey research. A manager who is evaluating the quality of a survey must estimate its accuracy. The two major sources of survey error are random sampling error and systematic error. Exhibit 8.1 explains the categories of survey errors. So if we start with the total error, we can see that total error has got two categories: random sampling error and systematic error. And then systematic error or systematic bias has got two categories: respondent error and administrative error. Respondent error has two categories: non-response error and response bias. Response bias further has got two categories: deliberate falsification and unconscious misrepresentation. So these two again can have four categories. And when we look at the administrative error, it has got four categories. So tree diagram of total survey error. When we see that total error has got two categories: random sampling error and systematic error bias. Random sampling error. Random sampling error is a statistical fluctuation that occurs because of change variation in the elements selected for the sample. Without increasing sample size, these statistical problems are unavoidable. Systematic error. Systematic error results from some imperfect aspects of the research design or from a mistake in the execution of the research. When we look at the tree diagram of total survey error, in systematic error bias, we have got two categories: administrative error and respondent error. Sample bias. Sample bias means when the results of a sample show a persistent tendency to deviate in one direction from the true value of the population parameter. Tree diagram of total survey error. Respondent error has got two categories: non-response error and response bias. Respondent error means a classification of sample bias resulting from some respondent action or inaction. That can be non-response error or response bias. Non-response error means non-respondents, people who refuse to cooperate, and when we have got the answer that they are not at homes, and self-selection bias can be there. That means overrepresents extreme positions and underrepresents indifference. In a restaurant, for example, a customer on whom a waiter spilled soup, a person who was treated to surprise dinner, or others who feel strongly about the service are more likely to complete a self-administered questionnaire left at the table than individuals who are indifferent about the restaurant. Self-selection biases distort surveys because they overrepresent extreme position while underrepresenting responses from those who are indifferent. Response bias, a bias that occurs when respondents tend to answer questions with a certain viewpoint that consciously or unconsciously misrepresents the truth. Look at the tree diagram of total survey error once again, and response bias has got two types: deliberate falsification and unconscious misrepresentation. It can happen that sometimes respondents deliberately falsify and hide the truth, and sometimes they unconsciously do the misrepresentation. The tree diagram of total survey error tells us about the acquaintance bias, extremity bias, interview bias, aspects bias, and social desirability bias. And these five types of response biases can be because of deliberate falsification or unconscious misrepresentation. Acquaintance bias. A category of response bias that results because some individuals tend to agree with all questions or to concur with a particular position. You might have seen it that sometimes respondents just take yes, 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 yes on every question they are asked. Extremity bias, a category of response bias that results because response styles vary from person to person. Some individuals tend to use extremes when responding to questions. Interviewer bias, a response bias that occurs when the presence of the interviewer influences answers. This is right. Often when interviewers interview someone, so definitely because of the presence of the interviewer, sometimes the interview has this interviewer bias. Aspects bias. Bias in the responses of subjects caused by the respondents being influenced by the organization conducting the study. Social desirability bias. Bias in responses caused by respondents' desire, either conscious or unconscious, to gain prestige or appear in a different social role. So whenever a survey research is conducted, so these are the errors in survey research that we have discussed under the respondent error in this part 1. So a researcher must take corrective measures or must take some measures to cope up with these errors in the survey research. Thank you. That's all for part 1.